Welcome to For the Love of Books, Bees Books Edition, a podcast by North Lanarkshire Libraries.
Hi, this is Pari.
And this is Jenny, and we're here to talk about
Bees Books. You know, I realize I say a flourish with Bees Books with my hands that nobody except you can see.
No, but have you never wondered why I duck sometimes?
I only noticed this today, so I'm learning new things about myself every day.
A lot of people do speak with their hands, though. You know, they kind of...
I do very much.
Yes.
So I think it might be an Indian thing, and then cut to an Indian person coming and telling me, how dare you tarnish us with all the same brush. I don't use my hands to speak. But I think it might be an Indian thing or just a me thing.
I think as well, because we both do BookBug, that you kind of do over-gesticulate things when you're doing BookBug to kind of emphasise things.
Yeah.
So we're going to say that's...
Basically, I just approach life as an extended BookBug session.
That's a good way of looking at things.
Yeah. No, not too bad. So anyway, the theme that we're here to talk about is a stranger in town.
Oh.
Which has, like, I'm again like making like shiny fancy signals with my hands. Mm-hmm. But I have an important question to ask you before that.
Yes.
Have you ever been a stranger in a town? And how has that experience been?
I can't say that I have. Like, obviously been on holiday to strange places. Well, York isn't strange, but you know what I mean. But I don't think I've ever felt a stranger anywhere, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
How about you?
I have, yes, because I'm like in a country that is...
Of course, yes.
But I mean, having said that, it depends. Like, the first place I ever lived in this country was Glasgow. Never felt like a stranger there. Just like completely like at home immediately. Coachbridge, where I'm working now at the library. I don't know that I felt a stranger, but it was more like it is a strange as an unfamiliar town. But again, super like a part of like things. So I haven't felt like a stranger except when my co-workers teach me Scottish phrases and I say them in my Indian accent, and everyone is equally delighted by each other's cultural. But one place where I have felt a stranger, which is controversial, I don't know if it is, Helensburgh.
Okay.
Yeah. So me and my partner, we went there for a farmer's market because we do bougie things sometimes. And we just wanted to eat like nice baked goods, basically. And people there seemed to have never seen a brown person before. Which was
yes, it's a holiday place.
But I think they were mostly locals, and they would like stop and stare at me. And I'm like, oh, I definitely felt like a stranger. To a point that Jack started noticing, and he would stop and glare back at them. So it became sort of this very aggressive stare off, and I was just avoiding eye contact. So yeah, Helensburgh is on my boycott list, just for the... Not, I say boycott, but I'm just like, I don't think I'm going to go there for a farmer's market again. Maybe like a second-hand book sale or something fun. But yeah,
Maybe it was just because you were a stranger, though. If it was more of a local market,
maybe. But this was all over Helensburgh. Like we were walking along the Esplanade. Is that a word? I feel like I said it very confidently. But yes, like around the river, and it just seemed like, yeah, it was very strange. They were the strangers, not me, is what I would like to say. So this is the story I whip out every time I'm like, oh, Helensburgh. Also, my partner is from Greenock, and which is just across the river.
Not a bit of kind of...
Yeah, so there is a rivalry. So I've like sort of gotten into the rivalry through another way.
Maybe it's not been you at all. Maybe it's been your partner that they've been staring at.
Maybe like, we can tell, we can sense the Greenock. Maybe. But anyway, we've just made enemies for life.
Excellent.
With the whole town of Helensburgh.
On the other hand, I've been to Helensburgh quite a few times, and it's lovely. There's lots of sea glass on the beach.
Oh, is there? Yes. Oh, I might go for that, and maybe like with the costume or something. Maybe if I dressed up as I don't know, Wookiee, maybe there would be less time.
Or a t-shirt that says I'm not from Greenock. That might be an option.
I'm gonna try that the next time. But yes, now talking about books, turning to strange books and strangers in books. What do you have?
Well, for my first offering, I'm going to talk about Death Under a Little Sky by Stig Abel. which I thought was very good. It's a crime book,
Okay.
because as you know, I quite like a crime
You
book.
do.
But I see your book hovering in the background, and it says interest me because it's like a doorstop.
It is a doorstopper. It's, I think, a grand total of 850 pages or so. And look at this gorgeous cover.
Oh.
It's called A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon.
Now, without turning it round, you've turned it round now, but I could tell straight away it was a fantasy book.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Without
yes.
ever hearing the author or anything.
Isn't this like,
It's
it is just a
beautiful cover.
fantastic cover as well, but also like I guess the dragon is a dead giveaway, but just such a it's not the kind of dragon I think we're used to in Western fantasy, and I think that's very deliberate. It's more like an Eastern dragon, an East Asian dragon, and there are a lot of different variations of strangers in this book, but there's a one specific kind of stranger that I'm going to be talking about.
Excellent.
What about your second offering? You said
I'm not going
first.
to tell you. I want to talk about my
it's
first book.
Well, go ahead then. Yeah, tell me how
So-
who is the stranger?
Well, I heard this author on the radio a few
Okay.
weeks ago, and I'd never heard of him. And he was talking away to somebody, and I thought, oh, you're actually quite interesting. I want to read your book, which hardly ever happens. You know, that you come across something like that just by accident.
Yeah.
So I eventually tracked down the book. It's a fairly new book, so I think what happened was lots of people had heard him on the radio and decided to read it.
Good on stick.
Yes. And basically it's about a police officer who's had a bit of a rough time with his partner, and his uncle dies and leaves him his house and lands. So he kind of gives up the police work, leaves the they come to a mutual leaving, shall we say, and he goes to this house, but it's literally in the middle of nowhere. There's no road to it, there's nothing. So I'm going to show you the map at the front again. Sorry, listeners who can't see the map.
Yeah.
Take the book out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So basically, his house is literally in the middle of nowhere, and he owns quite a lot of land around it. And then there's like a kind of village within walking distance. Just you can't drive there. And there's a mystery in the book as well, hence the crime. But I find it quite interesting because basically he leaves a world he's very familiar with. I think he's from London, the main character, who is called Jake, and he goes to this basically place in the middle of nowhere. There's no washing machine, which I know for some people they're like, what? But there's no washing machine. There's no kind of proper facilities, so it's like a wood stove fire kind of a thing that keeps the house warm and things like that. And it was interesting to see how he coped with that. Coming from somewhere where you get your rubbish picked up every week to somewhere where he has to get rid of his rubbish himself because there's no roads to the house. But what was fascinating was the house, the old man that was there before had this huge library, and for all the houses kind of in my head slightly crumbling and everything, the library is like an oasis, and it's just full of crime books. Some other books as well, but very much his uncle was very much into crime, and it's from all sorts of times as well. So there's a lot of, as we were talking in a previous podcast, a lot of Arthur Conan Doyle, right up to people like Robert Cray and James Patterson, people like that. So absolutely everything. And it's how he kind of copes in this house on his own, and it makes you realise that we still need human contact, because he does eventually go down to the village because he needs bits and pieces, and then he meets all the kind of, but he's the stranger, so he's the one going into this village, and he's the kind of stranger, and already they kind of know a bit about him because they knew his uncle. So they kind of know he was a police officer, and he worked cold crimes, and that kind of a thing.
Did he?
Yes.
So was it a cold crime in this?
Yes, it was, yes.
Okay.
And I like to think, I don't know if there's another book because I have not done some research, but if the series continues, which I hope it does, I like to think that maybe he's going to be like in at this house, but solving cold crimes with all the paperwork and things like that.
That's really interesting, because I've sort of recently started reading more mysteries. I've always used to read it, but I think the podcast as well, actually, I think talking to you to made me remember how much I enjoy mysteries. But cold cases aren't as much a feature of at least the books that I've read. Maybe they exist, but they all seem to be much more current, and so it would be really fascinating to see how the distance, what sort of benefits and disadvantages, and even just like how the structure shifts.
Well, this was the murder or crime was 10 years ago, so it's not a huge gap.
Right.
But you know, time has passed, people have changed.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because he ends up investigating basically off the record, and then the local police person kind of takes him on board unofficially. So he has access to some of their paperwork as well. But he talks to the local journalists and, has to talk to people. And obviously there has been a 10-year gap, so everybody's memories are slightly different, to what actually happened because time's passed. And it was interesting for that as well. As I say, I'd quite like it to go on. But what I found really interesting was how he adapted to this house and how he built himself a sauna in the garden. So one of the locals doesn't talk very much, but kind of knows how to build things. So he kind of helps him with bits and pieces and then teaches him how to go on and do it himself. So he builds this sauna because he swims in the lake every day, so he doesn't take a bath or a shower or anything, much to the love interest's horror, I have to say. And then he builds this sauna so that he can do this whole crazy people thing where they go and dive into cold water and then it has this sauna. And then from that he is able to build himself an outdoor shower that's heated through the sauna, so he kind of is taught one thing and he learns from that how to do something else. There's also a crazy professor guy that likes hedges. He's often found just talking about hedges, and obviously in my head that character became quite epic, but he kind of teaches Jake about the garden. So Jake wants to produce his own food so he doesn't have to shop too much, so he kind of
he's quite a curmudgeon.
Yes. He kind of learns how to plant potatoes and things like that, and the quiet guy kind of has access to trees and gets him some fruit trees and things like that, so he kind of sets things up. At one point he decides to get chickens as well, which turns into a big epic thing, and they're all named after Disney princesses, which is really cool, because the love interest's daughter names them. But it was good because it kind of gave you an idea. A lot of people kind of think, oh, I'd love to live on a desert island, no human contact whatsoever. But from this, you kind of realise that we still need a tiny bit, even if we don't want it. And he does kind of go to the village, for a wee pint or something, and doesn't really talk to many people, but just having those people around him kind of makes a difference for him.
Well, based on the map and the picture that you're painting of the house and its surrounds, it almost sounds like place as character as well. The place itself is the way that he interacts with it, and the way that he is a stranger, but then makes it his own in a way that works for him, even if it doesn't work for others.
He's never been to the house before. His uncle kind of was rich, and there's kind of hints as to how he became rich, but nothing concrete. And then lived in Florida for a long time, then decided he wanted to come home. So I think about 12 years previously he kind of went to this place and kind of bought all the land and all that kind of stuff, but nothing was named. And then when Jake gets here,
I did see one of the things on the map, Poirot Point.
Yes. So because Jake also loves the crime and because of his uncle, he names everything. So we've got Agatha Wood, Poirot Point, Sherlock Beach. We've got where the sheep live is called the Morse Meadow. I wasn't sure who Wolf was. But there's a wolf orchard.
Wolf, maybe? I don't know.
Probably. And then the lake is called Chandler Lake, and the island is called Reacher Island. So he's totally embraced the whole crime thing, and that's how he distinguishes each part of the land. because before it was just a clump of trees and a
Yeah,
field,
yeah.
and now he kind of names things differently. So
Yeah, that's it. Like even that sort of adds so much. It's like a child,
Yeah.
exploring this new place and naming it based on the things that they love. But I guess that's what adults do as well. They
Yes.
just go,
Uh-huh.
which is why you have so many like Perths
Yes.
all over and things. So
Yeah.
it
It-
sounds really nice.
It was good, and as I say, I hope there is more, and I will obviously do some research into finding out if there is any more.
Was the mystery satisfying though?
Yes, there was quite a few twists and turns, and I did quite like how he was being threatened basically because somebody didn't want him to discover what happened
Yeah.
and things like that. There was like a farm where they're growing drugs and things like that,
Oh.
and is that part of the story?
Yeah,
all that
a
kind
lot
of
red
stuff, and
herrings.
At one point, I was like, "Oh no, I know who's done it."
Yeah.
And then it's like, "Oh no, it wasn't him."
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I love that. That's my favorite thing in a
Yes.
mystery because I love feeling like I'm really clever, but I also love having the rug pulled up from
Absolutely,
underneath me.
absolutely.
So like,
Oh.
the author is clever.
I would say it kind of was a nice paced story, and then towards the end it was kind of slightly not rushed as such, but it went a wee bit too. I would have liked another couple of chapters.
Yeah.
But it was satisfactory. I did like the ending and how it kind of finished.
But like I like the sort of the way that you've described it. It seems to be not just a mystery story. Like it is a mystery story. But like a lot of like for example, like I'm listening to a lot of Agatha Christie stuff and Poirot. That's very much about the mystery and the characters are incidental and their lives are incidental. Whereas in this, it seems like the mystery is not an add-on, but at least places equal sort of importance on both the mystery and the characters' lives.
Absolutely. And the way I've kind of thrown it in here is he's a stranger in the house, a stranger in the village.
Yeah.
He's but at the end, people are kind of starting to accept him, and obviously because he's solved, a 10-year-old crime, that they're happy with him. But he doesn't just solve that. Because he solved that, other things come to light as well. But to me, it was kind of a mixture between like a Poirot novel and Robinson Crusoe, that he's just been kind of, left his own devices.
Yeah, that's an interesting sort of blend of genres.
Mashup, yeah.
Well, in your case, the stranger was really well received and was a really nice chap. In my case, the stranger that I'm going to be talking about led to worldwide death and destruction.
Okay.
To pivot completely. So this is actually a prequel to a book.
Oh.
And you just before we started recording said that I had a book come in for me because I had to reread it. The Priory of the Orange Tree was the first in the series. And it's a standalone book, and that's a doorstopper as well. And I read that about 5 years ago. And I really enjoyed it because of the kind of fantasy world building that was happening, the complexities of the characters, and just the strangeness of like dragons and things being a part of the story. Really enjoyed it. Then I didn't know there was going to be a second one. I don't think she knew there was going to be a second one. She wrote this over the pandemic. Just like, I was hardly like trying, like my brain was all over the place, and she just wrote like an 850 page novel. But I think she was, something in the world was calling to her a little bit. So she set this 500 years before. So this also works as a standalone. And I would recommend you actually read The Priory first and this second, because I think that's more an accessible read. This one's, I wouldn't say difficult, but it's really complex and complicated. And it's really magnificent. Like it's a very epic fantasy in the vein of Lord of the Rings and things. So lots of different characters and worlds and cultures coming together. But it's like the kinds of things that she's talking about here become legendary in the after 500 years. And I really liked that mix of it. So just to sort of a brief introduction, I have to be really brief because it's so big. It's set in a world, we see 4 different corners of the world. So in the West, there's a teenage queen. It's a queendom. And it's like hereditary. So like each sort of like a queen like gives birth to a daughter who looks very much like her. And that their bloodline is actually keeping this real evil at bay. Because 500 years before this, there was a worm. They call it a worm. They don't call it a dragon. Called the Nameless One, who had sown death and destruction, had erupted from a volcano, death and destruction. But then this king called Gallian went and defeated him, and he decided that to protect humanity, my bloodline, the women in my bloodline are going to give birth, and as long as they are ruling, it's going to keep this dragon at bay, which sounds just like the kind of thing a dude would say who just wants to establish a monarchy.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
but it is what they believe. They believe it's almost a religious thing. So you know me, I love my social and cultural and political history, and this book's full of that, but it doesn't need to be if you don't want it to be. But then in the East, so here like worms, bad, like bad thing. In the East is actually they worship dragons. They call them dragons there, and that's what you see on the cover, as gods. And because they've like worked with humankind, and they're the different kinds, so they're not the kinds of worms that the West is talking about. And but these dragons have slept, like fallen asleep for like hundreds of years, but now they're waking up because there is danger afoot. In the South, there is a priory of the orange tree, full of warrior mages, women, like warrior women, and also they do magic. And they were established by actually like this guy, Gallian, whoever set up the West. He wanted to marry this princess, but she decided that I want to marry, I'm going to defeat this dragon. And she does. So it is she who's actually defeated the dragon. And but he's like, it would sort of wreck with his reputation. So he's just made up a story. It was me. Because she was like, her sort of king was sacrificed. She was a princess and she was going to be sacrificed to the dragon, and instead she's like, no, I'm not going to be sacrificed. But then she established this priory, and they train women to be warriors because they know that the Nameless One is going to come back at some point, and the world needs to be prepared. So unlike the West, where they're just like, this bloodline is going to protect us, here they're like, no, we are going to protect you. But they have a different sort of religious, spiritual, political structure, because it's all based on like a prioress and things. And then there's the North, which is like really cold and things. And
as the North usually is.
As the North usually is, and there you see, not from the perspective, it's a boy called Wolf, but he was a foundling. He was found in like a forest in this country in the West.
Sorry, Pari.
No, you're fine. I hope this is not you.
No. I do not want your germs, Pari. Thank you very much.
My germs have gone out of my body, and you'll be like, oh no, they're coming towards me. Do you need a break? Do you need some water? So water would have been really good in this book, just as a segue, because of all the worm fire that's about to erupt. In the North, there's Wolf, who was found in like like a forest in the West, but they have like, he's accused of being a witchling, like a witch's child. And they don't like this in the West because they're only Gallians, like he's the saint, that's what they call him, and that's the only true religion. So witches are like all sort of not kosher, I guess. And so he's trying to figure out what's happening. Everyone's like distanced from him, but he's like a brave warrior, whatever.
That's a lot, Pari, already.
This is only setting up the characters, and throughout the book, it shifts, the perspective shifts from each like different like the characters, and they're all looking at the world differently, which I really find fascinating. But they all also know different things. They all believe in different truths, and they all just sort of approach reality from different perspectives. But the stranger so the Dread Mount, which is the volcano that gave rise to the original worm.
Wait, what was it called?
The Dread Mount.
Oh, excellent.
So it's a volcano. It erupts, and 5 dragons erupt. So it's not just one, it's 5 dragons. They're not the Nameless One, but they're 5 just like, I don't know, lieutenants or something who've come to revenge themselves on humanity for destroying the Nameless One in the first place. And it's awful. Like they're strangers, and also like 2 of them go to the east. I think 2 of them go to the south, 1 of them goes to the west, and just ruin and destruction. Like, it was actually quite difficult to read because they don't sanitize it. Much in the way, I suppose, Lord of the Rings doesn't really sanitize it. But in like epic fantasies, it's usually like a statistic. You know, it's like, oh, war is happening. Oh.
Yeah.
Whereas here you are in the trenches, in the different perspectives. So in the south, in the west, in the north, and in the east, you're like differently approaching, and you're seeing how it's affecting like just everyday people, and how like so much death, so much destruction. And at the same time, it's not just enough to bring fire into like towns. They also bring a plague in front of them, another stranger that's unwelcome in this town, and people are dying of the plague as well. I think because she was writing this during the pandemic, some of that must have infected her, but it's just awful.
Please tell me there's some hope in this.
Well, so the thing is, because I read the second book, I didn't remember anything like 5 years ago, but I knew broad strokes that okay, these things are going to survive. I didn't remember the characters because they're mostly new, but one of them, Glorian Shieldheart, as she comes to be known, I vaguely remembered her. I didn't know if she survived or not, but I knew that some things, structures were going to survive and some were going to mutate or whatever. So it wasn't like a spoiler as such, but I knew that the world wasn't going to be destroyed, let's say. But I didn't know how or what. So then I don't know that there is hope, because I know that terrible things happen in the second book again, or like the first book, I suppose. But there is, it's really interesting because I think it ends up being called the Grief of Ages, or the like Grief Ages, or Ages of Grief, or something like epic in epic ways. But it's sort of like almost the new old world is transformed into something new, and you would hope better because of the kinds of characters that we get to know, and the kinds of things they believe in, and how they approach, or how they, like, you know, when things they thought that they'd taken for granted, when they're told it's not true, how they approach that, or like how they are as people, I guess. So it's, like I said, it's complex, like it's not an easy book, and I think the author herself recommends that you read the first book first, because I think she wrote that as an accessible entry point. Not an entry point, as an accessible novel, whereas this is just like, I guess, for the fans. But it really made me want to reread the book again, because now I know so much about 500 years in the past, and I want to see how that informs 500 years in the future. And so that, I think, was really interesting, that this weird roundabout way of approaching a world. So I can't wait to reread.
Is there a map?
There are separate maps.
I do like a good map. Let's have a quick look.
And again, like the map, I think it rewards revisiting it after the book is, because at this stage you don't really know what is what, because there's so many places. It's like full of characters and places, which might put some people off, because you're not even getting to know these people, and then they're like killed or whatever. Sorry, spoilers, but it's war. And just like, I think there's like 3-4 different places, maps, but once you finish reading and you see the kinds of, because the east and west are completely cut off, like, well, mostly cut off. Some people take this really dangerous journey on a ship to go across, but it's like most of them die. So there's like, they don't know what's happening in different parts of the world. But when the dragons come back to life in the east, they're like flights, basically. You can like take them and you can travel, but it doesn't go well.
Oh, right, okay.
In this book. But yeah, so like some really nice, beautiful maps, but it's very much a part of the world. So I think like I really like looking at them after I'd finished reading.
Oh, see, I'm like, when I was reading my book, every time you mentioned Sherlock Beach, I was back at the map. Right, okay, I know where that is. I do love a map. To get kind of reference points. Now, the books will be wonderful without a map, but I do like a map.
But that's so interesting that, like, just that one visual aid invites people to approach it differently, like to engage with it, like you do that. Whereas I look at it in the beginning and I like it as a concept, but I'm like, but I don't know these people or places, or I don't, this makes no sense to me. I read the whole thing, imagine it in my head, and then like when I'm done, I go back and look at the map and I'm like, I see now. Now this map makes sense to me. Before I was like, who are you?
See, that's quite a...
So but that's what it, like, and someone else might read it completely differently as well, like have a different,
I'm interested to. I will read them in the order you've suggested. And is it just the two? There isn't.
For now,
But you can just read one without.
you can. Yes.
Okay.
She's called it very optimistically the Roots of Chaos
Oh.
series. That doesn't sound negative or depressing at all. But so she doesn't know.
Right,
She
okay.
doesn't know either because this wasn't supposed to exist. She's just like, happened. It happened. So
So it's not a Tamsin Muir situation
No.
where we'll be champing at the bit for
No.
the next one to come
No,
out.
but it like leaves enough at the end. Like I felt like I could have, like I wanted to know what happens next. But that's why now I want to go back to, even though it's said 500 years in the future, I'm like, oh, but did some of these things and conversations and ideas actually bear fruit in the
Right.
future? Because I don't remember. So, yeah.
Oh, very
So
interesting.
recommended, but recommended with some caution, I
Okay.
guess, because I don't think it would work for everybody. And much like Tamsin, I don't like. I think some people would like it and enjoy it, and some people it would just be because it doesn't move. It's not an action-packed sort of thing. You have to like spend time with it and like trust it to take you in a direction that, I guess, rewards.
I feel as if there's not been mythical dragons for a while. Because I do like a dragon. The last one was Robin Hobb, who I adore. But I feel as if there's not, before that we had Anne McCaffrey and people like that. There's not really been. I mean, there might have been. I've just not come across them, dragons before.
So have you read dragon books before?
Yeah. So the Robin Hobb books, and the dragons are different again to what we think of as some people think of dragons.
Yeah.
The Anne McCaffrey books I read a long time ago, but
Right.
they were different again.
And are the dragons characters?
Yes, very much so. They have their own voices and things
Yeah.
like that. So,
So see, I've never really been a dragon person. Like dragons have largely been like in the kind of fantasy books that I read. They've just been like more like animals, or like not like animals, but in a way that like a cat is an animal. Like you might be affectionate or scared or whatever, but it's not a character in its own right. I think Eragon was like when I was growing up by Christopher, what's his name? Sorry. Paolini, yes. That was, I think I read the first one. I was like, I see. And I guess How to Train Your Dragon a little bit for younger.
Oh yes, I'm now remembering there's lots of dragons out there.
No,
Apologies.
but it's not like I think it can like pass you by as well. So Naomi Novik, the person who wrote the Evil School series that I can't remember.
Scotch,
yeah. She got really famous for writing a sort of sprawling work of a series of dragons called Temeraire, and I've read the first book in it, and it was so weird in a good way, but it was basically like a history of the Napoleonic Wars in the UK.
Okay.
So England versus France, but with dragons. And the dragons are characters, and it's like a military history almost, which is something I have zero interest in.
Yes.
But she made me care. She made me care about dragons. She made me care about militaries. She made me care about Napoleonic Wars.
Excellent.
And so it was just a very bizarre sort of fantasy kind of thing. Like they're just like, if a battle is happening, there's just like dragons happen to be a part of it.
It's a bit like the books I was reading, the French Revolution ones with vampires.
Yes.
So yes, it's historic, but there's also vampires.
So are you ready to talk about your second book?
Yes, but very briefly.
Okay.
Because
you've like whetted my appetite. I can't let people go.
No, and I'm not sure how I kind of squeezed
We'll
it in.
see. We'll see, yes. The last episode we had sorry, I got distracted.
I showed her the book there. Sorry, people.
I got distracted by the book. This is 100% A Stranger in Town.
Yes,
one
it
of
is.
my favourite books in the world.
So a while ago we spoke about this on the podcast. Fly by Night by Frances Hardinge. Are we saying there?
Harding, maybe?
Hardinge. There's an
Frances. We're on first name
Frances,
terms.
yes. Yes. And yes, there is a stranger in town, eponymous Clint comes to a village where our hero, Mosca, is trying to escape from, shall we say, not to give too much away. And yes, so that's the stranger in it. But I just wanted to say thank you for recommending it, because I really enjoyed it, and I would never have picked that up Even though now looking at the cover, it is a very pretty cover, and there is an evil goose on the front.
But we didn't even have the book.
No, so
So you couldn't have picked it up.
So we now have it, so
Uh-huh.
people can take it. But it's completely different than in my other book. But at the same time, yes, there's a stranger in town, and you know how people see him, and basically Mosca becomes his secretary, which basically means dog body, and does all sorts of things. But for a teenage book, and quite a small teenage book, there was an awful lot in it. And I can see why you loved it, because of the whole social experiment of, you know, it's just a whole new world, but very much loosely based on a kind of, I don't know, sort of Victorian kind of guild world. You know, where these different guilds are kind of, you know, ruling the place without actually anybody really realising they're ruling. That was a lot of errors there. And you know, there's a whole like you know, religion of like they've got these wee gods who kind of, you know, one is in charge of like just completely random things,
like protecting pies from flies.
Yes, and it's just like completely random, but at the same time believable, if that makes sense.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Because a long time ago, that's what people believed in. They didn't believe in the big, you know, gods. You know, they believed in, you know, whispering a kind of chant to somebody so that their pie didn't burn in the oven, or, you know, that the crops, you know, didn't get some kind of horrible disease and things like that. You know, it's like that, but that's a kind of side story as well. You know, this could have been a you know, 10-part, you know, book if she'd went into things, and I'm kind of glad she didn't. Because I like the fact that they kind of mentioned in passing, and you kind of make up your own story, if that makes sense, about you know, these things. But it's just a wonderful book,
and it feels like fantasy but isn't, and it feels like history but isn't. It's like I just
it's a bit of everything.
It is.
You know, I think if you never thought you would read a fantasy book and you read this, you would go, you know, if you're not like a historical person, like your Napoleonic Wars, you know, you would suddenly go, oh, actually.
It's
you know.
actually made me really interested. So, like, about the guilds, all like the Stationers Guild, the Thieves Guild, like whatever, or not the Thieves Guild. I think I'm thinking of Pratchett there.
Yes.
But you know, all these Locksmiths Guild
yeah.
and all these different guilds and how they control things. But then also these coffee houses that are a hotbed for rebellion.
Yes.
This all existed, like not just in England. I think in France as well.
Yes,
maybe other European countries, and I'm sure versions of it in other parts of the world. And I loved how people coexist together. I think that's like a theme in all three books, like in terms of how people from different beliefs and different backgrounds and whatever, political, social, cultural, religious things, they're coming together and learning how to live together.
Yes, we all can get on if we try, is basically what they're saying.
Yeah, and it's just fantastic. And you're so right about like the sort of the value of touching upon a bunch of these things but leaving enough gaps for you to fill them in. Because in the second book, so there's a second standalone book again, Twilight Robbery, they go to a wholly different part of the country, like of the kingdom, and it's a completely different setup there with different characters and different sort of political issues, I guess.
Does the goose go with them?
The goose is an integral part. It's a trio.
Excellent.
So, the murderous goose.
I think the goose possibly is my favourite character. I like there's a point where, not to spoil anything, but basically the goose takes over a ship. You know, and the sailors can't go on because basically the goose is there. And the goose will not be happy if you go. Just wonderful.
I also love the highwayman, who is against his best efforts and totally contrary to what he believes. He's been made a folk hero, and he's so grumpy about it. Like, this poem has been written by Eponymous Clent. I don't even know how to say it.
I say
Clent. Yes, that's the correct way. I'm going to say Clent. I'm going to say Clent. So like they at the beginning of a book, just like a chance encounter where he's like trying to rob a carriage, and Clent is like, okay, you know, like I'll make. He has a way with words. Like,
I definitely has a way with words.
Sort of the love of words and language is dripping through this book. You can tell. and he's just like, he sort of convinces him that, you know, it's better to like create a legend out of you. You're just now a no-name highwayman, but I am going to make you a star.
Which is just a way of him surviving, basically.
Yeah, and he does make it.
He does.
He could have just gone and been like, oh, forget him, he's never going to come after me. But he has some morals, not many morals.
No.
He has some morals, and he makes this a thing. And then the next time he meets him, he is furious, this highwayman, because like now all these legends have made him a folk hero. So he's like, oh, I guess I have to do this now.
And I like the fact that, you know, women are like swooning in the street when they see him, and he's just like a guy who robbed people. But this like legend has been made up around him.
And they're helping him out, like they're hiding him in barns, and he's like, oh, I guess they've helped me now. I can't like let the police burn the barn down, so I guess I have to fight. But he's so grumpy about it. Yeah,
and there's a great bit where he kind of he's a duel, and he's supposed to do something, and he suddenly thinks, well, if I do that, then I'm going to destroy what's been made. And although I'm quite happy with walking away from this, people are not going to be happy about that. So he does something that he wouldn't usually do. And then that kind of even makes it more of a, like, so from something very small, this huge big thing is grown.
But like, and a lot of it is like jokey. Like it's something that you would laugh at. Like I'm sure like she was like so proud of like sneaking these jokes in. But you know what you said, you're so right, that it does have so much in it. Like even though it's just brushed up like across, it's like really important, the kinds of things it's talking about with the lightest of touches.
It makes you think, which I think is a brilliant thing about a book. You know,
absolutely.
It makes you think. You know, you'll stop a chapter and you'll think about, you know, and I can't remember any of them now, but the god that, you know, you leave a flower out for and it will protect your, you know, toenail clippings or whatever, you know, and it makes you think about things like that. And even
really like good. About things about like small things and big things, like about how the world works and the people in it, but also like how you engage with like each other, and also like the god of like, I guess, toenails. It's just, I'm so glad you liked it. And I recommend it so much to everybody.
And that brings us to our theme for next time. Because B has decided our next theme is recommendations. Now she's left it open, so it could be a book that we've recommended each other, a book recommended to us, but just completely open. So that's recommendations.
Lovely. I'm actually really excited. I think I might have a problem of over recommendations. I'm gonna have to like sort of narrow it down to the top 6.
Yes. We'll come in next time with a huge big stack of books.
But it was lovely spreading the love and talking about strangers, both good and bad, and morally to be. Yes. But thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next time.
Bye.